Here we are at the church Basilica Visitation. Unfortunately, we came a little bit late, and so we're locked out, so we have to return to Jerusalem. Me and my friend Arthur here, you can see in the back. But we got a nice walk down. We'll probably stop by at Mary Spring just before we head back. It's on the way. And yeah, you can see John the Baptist's birthplace in the distance. And we noticed two things that you had in the basilica. Both basilicas. In the Church of the Visitation, on the outside you have plaques in all the different languages saying the Magnificat, the Song of Our Lady. That's sung at Vespers. And in the Basilica of John the Baptist, you have the Benedictus, the morning prayer, in different languages. I just said the rosary with my friend Arthur at a decade, and I finished by singing the Salve Regina in Latin. Now, why do we, as Catholics faithful to tradition, pray in Latin? Why not Aramaic? Why not just have multiple different languages like Vatican II says to do? Let's start with that. So, for starters, actually, if you look at the Second Vatican Council's decree on the liturgy, as much as I hate Vatican II, it still says the official language of the church is Latin, and that the liturgy is preferably, according to Vatican II's decree, is to be said in Latin. Much as I dislike it, that is still church teaching. That is still the officialdom position of the church. You do not need dispensation to say Mass in the Latin language. So basically, do the Novus Ordo in Latin. So, and we're going down the steps here, as you can see. So why is that? Why have a liturgical language? Well, having a liturgical language is something that is carried over from Judaism, actually. If in Hebrew, in synagogues today, and I was recently in the Herva synagogue, just as a tourist, I filmed a little video there, comparing it to show how Orthodox synagogues actually, because specifically the traditional Latin Mass, there's some parallels with how traditional Catholic churches are set up. I mentioned how they still use Hebrew as their languages. In fact, since I've been here, I've had the privilege being allowed to see one of the original Dead Sea Scrolls. And in those Dead Sea Scrolls, when they came to writing the personal name of God, the Tetragrammaton, they didn't even just use Hebrew letters. They used Paleo-Hebrew letters. Having this reverence for language, it's a way of showing reverence to God. It shows us a connection with the past, something more ancient. That it is not something that we created. This is something that was handed down to us, the faith that was handed down to us. So, why use the liturgical language in Latin? Is there any evidence for this other than wishful thinking? Well, yes, there is. For starters, the original liturgical language of the church would have been Greek. How do we know this? Because the letter of Paul to the Romans was not written in Latin. The original version of it is Greek, and we know that the people who were going to church would not have been educated Greek-speaking elites. They would have spoken Latin. So why isn't the letter of Paul to the Romans written in Latin as the original language? Why is it originally in Greek? True, it was lingua. Why? Because because Greek may have been the lingua franca, but there was an adherence of notion that this church is an international church, so it needs an international language, and even in ancient Rome, that was Greek. To this day, now, there can be other liturgical languages. In fact, the Council of Trent condemned the notion that all the services have to be in the language of the common people. That is officially condemned by the Council of Trent. That is not, if you think that you from a Catholic position are a heretic. Why? Because God understands all languages. God is not praying to the congregation. And even in churches that use vernacular, historically, there are versions of the vernacular language that are considered more reverent that are used. Think about language used in the KJV Bible, if you're a Protestant. But there are a number of things that reflect Catholic teaching in this regard. For starters, the Latin language specifically is an homage to the papacy and the See of Rome. So by using Latin, we are showing belief in the primacy of the Diocese of Rome, not just the individual person of individual pontiff, but to the see itself, as well as an homage to the martyrs of the Latin Church. It also mortifies the desire to be excessively nationalistic. So if you're a bit of a leftist and hate extreme nationalism, I got news for nationalists. Latin is used to keep nationalism from going too far. It is a reminder that the church is universal. Latin belongs to everyone but no one in particular, because it is a dead language. John the 23rd, who has been canonized by Vatican II Catholics, I might add, said this in his decree on Latin, and even forbade people from teaching theology if they could not do it in Latin. Finally, the spread of languages, multiple languages, is a curse from the Tower of Babel. So having one common language is a sign of restoration in Christ our God. So I'll just come over here, finish up the Spring of Mary. I'll be right with you in a minute, Arthur. So we as Catholics should have devotion to our proper liturgical languages. We should cling to our liturgical languages. It is a biblical practice. It is something that reflects our unity with the See of Rome, and it reflects our heritage of the past in the Roman Church. Even not just an individual Roman pontiff, but to the See itself. So, keep using Latin. And in case you're wondering why not just use other liturgical languages, there are other liturgical languages. Syriac, for example, the language of Jesus is still used both by Orthodox Jews in running their ketubahs, as well as it's the language used in the Syrian Catholic Church, and is still used by Maronites for consecrating the Eucharist. Speaking of Syriac, someone who would have spoken Syriac is our Blessed Mother, and this is the aqueduct, an aqueduct that would have dated from her time. It is the Spring of Mary. If you ever come to Encarni, make sure to visit. If you ever get a chance to check out an SSPX church in real life, please do so. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedictus et benedictus Spiritus Christi Jesus, Sanctum Mater, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in mortis nostri. Amen. In nomine Patris et Filii Spiritus Sancti. Amen.